Hello, gathered friends, I'm Perora Nuva, and welcome to Bionicle Deep Dive, where we analyze the tropes, characters, and lore of LEGO Bionicle. In this video, we're going to be going over my personal picks for the most overpowered Great Kanohi masks in Bionicle lore. The Kanohi masks of power are one of the most iconic features of Bionicle. The Great Kanohi gave their wearers any one of a vast array of additional powers. Most masks offered very solid, useful powers for combat or exploration. They were usually pretty balanced as far as powers go, offering a single distinct ability that also had limitations in scope or certain drawbacks that made it a useful tool in a character's arsenal, but not anything that could dominate or completely change the game. These are not those masks. The masks on this list are all ones that go beyond simply being a useful additional power to being a game-changing new ability. While in theory all great masks are at the same power level, some of them are very clearly written in ways that make them way more powerful and useful, with some of these masks turning their users into one-person armies, and even having massive plot-shaping influence just from their Kanohi power alone. Now, I'm not calling these masks overpowered as a bad thing. I think they were pretty well written and handled in the stories they were in. However, it just kind of seems absurd to place these masks in the same category as the other standard masks. I mean, levitation and turning invisible are all nice and stuff, but they don't really compare to, say, raising an entire undead army. I'm not going to be including the legendary masks in this list, because that would be too obvious. I mean, of course the legendaries are overpowered. That's kind of the point of them. Their narrative role is to be these extremely powerful cosmic-level objects that are more plot devices than they are tools. I also will be limiting myself to examining how OP or not these masks are based on feats we see in story. And I won't be diving too deeply into theoretical feats, because while that would be fun, it could easily get carried away and outside of the realm of what characters could usually achieve in story. Also, I know I say in the title that it's a top 10 list, but it actually ended up being 11 plus a couple of honorary mentions. Some of these masks were just too good not to include, but top 10 is way more eye-catching. Gotta please that algorithm. Sorry for the deception, but hey, you get a bonus. So let's get started on my list of overpowered masks. Number 11. The Kanohi Calyx, the Mask of Fate. The Calyx, worn by Toa Inika Jaller, lets the user perform physical feats at the absolute peak of their ability, and with perfect precision and coordination with no training or practice. Jaller most often used the mask for impressive feats of agility and gymnastic coordination, and to dodge and react in ways he didn't think were possible. While the mask didn't actually enhance their physical abilities, it allowed them to function at physical perfection. Basically, if their body was capable of a feat, the mask ensured that they did it exactly the way they needed to. In his first and arguably most impressive feat with the Calyx, Jaller leapt across a gorge, caught Ha-Li as she was falling, and twisted his body to use the changing momentum to land right on the other side. Such a feat would have taken years of practice and coordination to even be possible to get right, but the mask allowed him to do it on instinct. I'm not exactly sure why it's called the Mask of Fate, though it may be because it allows for perfect luck in regards to what one can do. For those of you who play Dungeons & Dragons, it's almost like the mask allows its user to always get a nat 20, a perfect dice roll that gives critical success. It doesn't allow the impossible, as shown when Jaller got hit by the blast by Hakan and Thok that there was no way he could get away from. But even still, it allowed him to twist his body to take the least amount of damage of the Toa. I'd say it's pretty obvious that a mask that allows you to always perform at your best in any situation deserves a spot on this list, though it still has some limitations that keep it from being higher up. Number 10. The Kanohi Avaza, the Mask of Hunger. The Avaza, worn by Makuta Vampra, gave its user the ability to steal energy, positive emotions, and even moral light from its target at a distance. This energy drain leaves the victim completely weakened and adds that strength to the user. It's much like the Rakshi Vorak, but unlike Vorak, the Avaza does not require physical contact. It can be done at a distance. This alone would make the mask terrifying to go up against, but what elevates this mask is its ability to drain moral light from the target, like a shadow leech, turning the target into a creature of shadow and a servant for the Makuta, such as when Vampra did this to Radiac, turning him from a Matorn of light into a Matoran of Shadow. The ability to permanently change both a target's element and moral alignment from a distance is a doozy of a power. Number 9. The Kanohi Elisi, the Mask of Alternate Futures. The Elisi, worn by the Mad Titan Karzani, allows its user to show its target an illusionary future of an alternate course of events. He most often used it as a form of psychological torture, showing potential upstarts in his realm nightmarish alternate futures that cause them to question their resolve. The visions are so vivid and realistic that even if the target knows it's an illusion, it can still leave them hauntingly shaken. With it, Karzani was able to end most fights before they even began. He can also use its power to show pleasant or ideal futures to a target, or targets, such as when he did that to Lesovik, showing him a future where his team didn't perish. This usage is arguably even more dangerous, as the victim can become trapped in an illusion they would never want to leave. What's even more surprising is that the illusions were not limited to Karzani's knowledge. Rather, they seem to pull from the best or worst case scenario from the minds of those forced to live in it. This was shown when he put a vision of Matanui's death on the future Toa of Nika. Prior to this, Karzani denied the existence of the Great Spirit, but after viewing the vision himself was in fact convinced. A mask that allows for custom-made psychological warfare is incredibly powerful, and that's why it makes it onto this list. Honestly, it makes sense, considering that it was the consolation prize for Karzani after he lost the true legendary Mask of Creation. Going into a little bit of speculative tangent, I wonder if he attempted to use the mask to envision how the Matoran he was repairing should turn out, but the nature of the mask made the futures he saw imperfect, and so were his repairs. Number 8. The Kanohi Zath, the Mask of Summoning. The Zath, worn by Toomari Kongu, allows its user to summon animals to their aid. It's incredibly powerful, as shown it can summon a small army's worth of Rahi, or even awaken titanic kaiju-sized behemoth from their slumber to aid the user. In many of Kongu's usages of the mask, it drastically changed the flow of the battle. Part of what makes this mask so dangerous are actually its biggest drawbacks. The user has no control over what animal is summoned, nor do they have any control over what the creature does when it arrives. The user also cannot use the mask to send the creature away. The creature only seems to have vague instructions to help, and that can manifest in a variety of ways depending on what the creature chooses. This alliance is also very much temporary, as the ancient sea behemoth Kongu summoned showed up again in a later battle and chose to attack them. This unpredictability factor makes the mask incredibly dangerous, but also prevents it from being any higher on the list. Honestly, I really had to put this mask here just because of how hilarious it is. I mean, it summons a random animal to your location, and you have no ability to tell it what to do or make it leave. You can have an instant army, but you never know what they'll be or what they're going to do. Kongu got really screwed over here, and I just can't stop laughing about it. Still, it makes it onto the list from its potential to completely reshape the course of a battle. Number 7. The Kanohi Felnas, the Mask of Disruption. The Felnas, worn by Mikuta Gorast, allowed its user to cause the target's powers to go out of control with just a simple touch. Gorast had used her mask's power to cause her opponent's own powers to backfire on them, such as when she caused Poatunua to bury himself in stone, or on Krika's ghost-like form, causing him to become so intangible he faded from existence. Its main limitation is that it required direct contact to be used, but even still, it made Gorast even more of a nightmare in combat. What's so insane about it is that it makes the user more dangerous the more powerful their opponent is. It should also be noted that no other mask, at least Great Mask that is as directly involved in the deaths of major characters, with Gorast using its power to kill 2 of her fellow Mikuta. Number 6. The Kanohi Garai, the Mask of Gravity. The Garai, used by Toomari Hyuki, allowed its user to increase or decrease the weight of their chosen target, causing it to either become weightless and float away, or crash to the ground with crushing weight. It essentially turned Hyuki into a Toa of 2 elements, and he even felt at certain points that his mask was so powerful it was unfair to his opponents. It should be noted that the mask's power only seems to apply to specific targets, and has not been shown to affect gravitational fields over a wide area, which is comparatively limited next to other gravity users the series has shown. Though that may just be what was written, and the mask might be able to affect those wider areas. The mask is also incredibly precise, as Suki once increased and decreased weight on certain sections of a large eel to effectively tie it in a knot. The vast array of usages, combined with an already extremely powerful ability, makes the Mask of Gravity a true force to be reckoned with. Number 5. The Kanohi Kakama, the Mask of Speed. The Kakama, used by several characters but most famously by Toa Pohatu, grants the user incredible super speed. They can cross vast distances in a heartbeat, in many cases traveling faster than the eye can see. The entire landscape becomes a blur to them as they travel, though thankfully they are also given heightened reflexes so they can react at super speed. The increased speed isn't just useful for running, as users have been shown able to deliver hundreds of punches in a second. They can also cause tornadoes and wind gusts by running around, even capable of creating a vacuum around their target. A user on Tumblr, Rahi Watching, did calculations on just how fast a Kakama user can run based on Pohatu running from Pokoro to Mount Ihu in Tale of the Toa. Link to their post in the description. According to their calculations, Pohatu must have been running at about 6 times the speed of sound, which is insane. I will note that they say Pohatu crossed this distance in under a minute, though I could not find a proper source for that time in the actual book. However, that is still totally possible, as the narration heavily implies that it was a very short time. Even if we increase the time to several minutes, he's still traveling at speeds comparable to Mach, which puts the mask power way above that of normal masks. In fact, part of this list was really inspired with how powerful the Kakama is compared to other great masks used by the Toamata, as this mask seems to increase the user's speed way more than, say, the Pakari increases the strength, for example. Pohatu once claimed to have run so fast that the desert sand beneath his feet fused to glass from the heat and friction he caused. In the real world, sand turns to glass at around 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, or 1,700 degrees Celsius. Even if we were to ignore the math of real-world physics, that is still a mind-blowing feat. And these powers only continue to become more insane when we talk about the Kakama Nuva, the upgraded form of the mask after being exposed to energized protodermis. While all the Nuva masks were more powerful than their standard counterpart, only the Kakama offers its user a completely new and insanely overpowered ability. With the Kakama Nuva, the wearer can control their speed so finely that they can control the vibration of their molecules. And if they vibrate just right, they can phase through solid objects as if they weren't there. By the way, that's not physically possible! It's very clear that Greg Farshtey, who wrote all the books that feature the Kakama's additional powers, was a big fan of The Flash, because these are powers straight from a comic book speedster. The Kakama's insane, literally physics-breaking powers are what earn it a clear spot on this list. Number 4. The Kanohi Faxon, the Mask of Kindred. The Faxon, worn by both Toa Mari Hali and Toa Lezovic, allows its user to copy the abilities of any animal that lives in their surrounding environment. Hali, with her intense knowledge of sea creatures, used this mask to great effect in the waters around Mari Nui, calling upon numerous powers of sea beasts to augment her already impressive powers underwater. Given the amazing powers shown by various Rahi beasts across the series, a wielder of this mask has an entire arsenal of varied and unique powers to draw from just from this one mask, making it useful far beyond any of the other masks that are limited to one power. Number 3. The Kanohi Trina, the Mask of Reanimation. The Trina, worn by Toa Mari Matoro, allows its user to reanimate corpses around its user to serve them. These reanimated bodies do not have souls, and don't possess any of the knowledge, powers, or skills from when they were alive, essentially being a zombie puppet for the wearer to use. We are never shown a hard upper limit for the number of corpses the user can summon, but Matoro once raised an entire army to challenge Prydak's army of sharks, though it did require intense mental concentration. For obvious reasons, this mask was considered deeply immoral by Toa standards, and was only given to Motoro as a test from the Mask of Life. Every time he used the mask, he felt as if a piece of himself was being lost. Still, the ability to raise an instant, loyal, undead army for oneself earns this mask a high spot on this list. Number 2. The Kanohi Motrek, the Mask of Time Duplication. The Motrek, worn by Makuta Batil, allows its user to summon past versions of themselves to aid them. These are not clones, they are literally the user themselves, plucked from some point in the past and brought to the present. An instant, completely loyal army that understands itself and is as powerful and intelligent as the user. And when that user is a Makuta, they become almost unstoppable. There appears to be no limit to the number of time duplicates the mask can summon. Batil at one point called nearly 50 versions of himself. Concentration is needed to keep them in the present, and it's shown several times that stunning Batil was enough to get rid of his past selves. When the past versions are sent back to their time, their memories of the future are erased, so they won't know what happens, but physical injuries inflicted to the duplicates do stay with them. This ends up making the mask both a blessing and a curse, as Batil notes that he often finds himself suddenly having injuries he can't remember getting, because some future version of Batil summoned him to a fight. He often feels he never knows how much energy he can exert, since he may have exhausted himself in some future fight he has no recollection of. If one of the past selves is killed, it will supposedly create an alternate timeline where the user died. That potential to fracture the timeline is a major reason why Toa don't use it, as it tampers with a fundamental force of nature. That ability to affect time itself means the Motrek skirts the domain of the Vahi, the legendary Mask of Time. And even without that, this mask literally turns its wearer into a one-person army, an absolute beast of a power that very few masks can top. Now, before I reveal my number 1 pick for the most overpowered Kanohi mask, here's 3 quick honorable mentions. The first 2 go to the Mask of Possibilities worn by Toa Nikila, and the Mask of Mutation worn by Makuta Miserix. The Mask of Possibilities allows the user to increase or decrease the probability of an event happening, much like the original powers of Scarlet Witch from Marvel Comics. The Mask of Mutation allows its user to mutate or undo mutations from a target from a distance, provided the user understands the mutation. Both of these are incredibly overpowered abilities. However, we never actually see either of them used in story, so it wouldn't feel fair to put them on the proper list. The final honorable mention goes to the Golden Kanohi. These were the masks the Toamata found after finding and combining all 6 types of Great Mask they found hidden on the island of Matanui. These masks give the users the combined powers of shielding, strength, speed, levitation, X-ray vision, and water breathing, all at the same time without needing to switch masks. It's been implied that the powers of each component mask are enhanced by the combination. It's also shown that the Golden Kanohi give their users way more energy than standard Kanohi, with the Toa being staggered by the amount of power surging through them while wearing the masks. The reason why these masks are put into honorable mention category rather than the list proper is mainly because them being overpowered is kind of the point. They're literally 6 times as powerful as the standard Great Kanohi the Toamata wore, one of which is already on the list. They were supposed to be these objects of higher power, and on this list I wanted to show off masks that were supposed to be on that same power level, but written in ways that make them stronger. I mean, just look at the combination of powers here. TTV's Ven once noted that these combination of powers makes the users basically Superman, and he's right. Super strength, super speed, the ability to float on air, invulnerability through force fields, the ability to see through walls, and ability to breathe underwater. All of these are hallmark powers of Superman, one of the most overpowered characters in modern fiction. That overpoweredness is probably why it seems we don't see them use their full potential very often. I mean, yes, we see the Toa use each of their mask powers frequently, but we don't see much extensive use of the combination powers, and they only have the Golden Kanohi for a short time before being transformed into Kanohi Nuva. It would have been really cool to see the Toa use them more extensively and creatively in combat. or in exploration, especially against the Borok, who were an overwhelming force. It would have been cool to see them let loose a little, as they were kind of the perfect enemy to explore these powers while still being challenging and not contributing too much to power creep. Anyways, there's no way I could make this list without mentioning them. Now, onto my number 1 pick. Number 1, the Kanohi Olmec, the Mask of Dimensional Gates. The Olmec, worn by Brutaka, allows its user to open portals to transport themselves or others to other locations or even to other dimensions. This other dimensional aspect is what elevates the mask for me, because it opens up nearly unlimited possibilities. These alternate dimensions can be worlds that function completely different from the main one, or it could be very similar but alternate history versions of the main storyline. In these alternate history stories, we can see how things might have turned out differently, and see how these changed events changed the characters we're familiar with, to the point where it allowed Bionicle to explore whole other genres and tones beyond its normal one. It's very clear from the story serials that Greg Farshtey absolutely loves alternate universe stories. Some have argued maybe a little too much, but I certainly can't deny that many of them were fascinating what-if stories. Nearly a third of the side stories in the second half of the series involve alternate dimension plots in some form or another. And all of them involve the usage of an Olmec, which is the only thing in the Bionicle story shown to be capable of creating portals to alternate dimensions. When a mask is single-handedly capable of enabling an entire subgenre of Bionicle plotlines, it's no longer just a tool for the character to use. This mask has entered the realm of being a full-blown plot driver, a distinction usually reserved for the legendary masks. And that's why I put Olmec at the very top of this list. Because the power to affect the characters is one thing, but the power to shape the entire plot is a whole other dimension. That's my list of the most overpowered Bionicle Kanohi masks. I'm not the only one who made a list like this. Both the TTV channel and the Shouted 1-1 have their own takes on the top 10 Bionicle masks. Check them out too. But what do you guys think? Do you like this list, or would you put other masks in it, or change the order? Let me know in the comments what your list would look like, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care, my gathered friends.